Hello and welcome to... I needed to analysing Avatar because technically this week we are indeed analysing Avatar. Way of Water. The second movie in the very profitable Avatar franchise. Yeah, we're here. It's Avatar, Chris. It's Avatar 2, Way of Water. Do you feel connected to our way?
I feel like there is often a correlation with Rewind reviews where, you know, if it's a shorter movie, it'll be a shorter podcast. If it's a longer, you know, sometimes you can almost draw a slight correlation between movie length and podcast length. And I'm here to tell you, listeners, not today. We are not talking about this movie for 3 hours. In some ways, for a 3-hour movie, there's not much to say. I'm tired. Do you know why I'm tired, Dan? I'm tired and I feel rough, Dan. Do you know why I feel rough, Dan? Because I had to keep eating. I had to eat almost an entire bag of giant Wotsits because I had to do something to stay awake when watching this movie.
Yeah, it's a painful one.
I feel groggy. It's what, sorry?
Yeah, it's a painful one. I mean, look, like Chris hasn't seen this prior to us doing this, and we normally do history, but a history of the franchise we cover in the podcast for the first one. In terms of my history with this specific movie, I stand by my choice to see it in a cinema because I thought if I'm gonna have to sit through this movie, I'll sit through it once, and I'll do it in cinema where I'm gonna get potentially the best possible experience because I'll at least the shallow nonsense of a movie will be at least less painful if I can sort of look at it like a really expensive like tech demo. Where I can go, it looks really pretty and it's really engrossing in that way, and I feel very like I'm in the world, even if the characters are cardboard cutouts. The story is about as deep as a puddle. You know, there's all of that shit won't be a problem. So I did that. I sat and I saw it in the cinema, and I still came out wanting to fucking scratch my eyes out because it was such an obnoxiously long movie. And I say obnoxiously long, and I want to talk about this a little bit because people often I've heard criticism of us before complaining when a movie is long. When I'm saying a movie is long, I'm not saying the movie is too long as just a criticism in of itself. When I'm concerned with the movie's length, what I'm really essentially saying is this story did not need this amount of time. That's what I'm essentially saying. I think there are movies that earn their length. Right? Oppenheimer was extremely long. I think, as much as I didn't even care for Oppenheimer that much. It didn't make it into my top 10 of the year, which is for a lot of people shocking, I know. But I think it earned its length. I understand why that movie is as long as it is. It absolutely deserved it and used that time well. This movie is an absolute insult to my patience and my time because it is somehow deeply overstuffed while being overlong and shallow at the same time. It's like they mistook having lots of stuff for depth. And saying the same thing over and over again with hundreds of scenes that all make the same fucking point will make your, let's use a water analogy, will make the water you've thrown out there very wide, but it will just be a puddle. It will have no depth to it. So it is long and it takes a while to cross, but there's nothing to it. I could not imagine fucking this up any more than they did. It's an absolute shit show top to bottom, and it's the worst kind of movie for this podcast because it's not so obnoxiously bad that I'm going to sit here nitpicking, and there's some nitpicks to be made, I'd say, and I'm sure we'll have some fun pulling that stuff apart, but this isn't even that kind of bad. This is just drivel. Middle of the road, generic, almost entirely uninspired drivel. Now, there are some flashes of ingenuity or inspiration in this movie, but as an overall thought, this is a fucking pain to watch, and I would not recommend it for anyone. under any circumstances. Even if it came back into the cinema, I wouldn't recommend it, and we will talk about why in a minute. Because there's another issue that I had with my actual cinema-going experience, which is unrelated to the experience Chris and I will have had rewatching it for this podcast, but is very pertinent in general to if they do a re-release, let's say. Which they probably will, right? They'll re-release this and the other one right before the third one comes out, probably. So with that all in mind, right, that's my sort of overall thoughts. Don't recommend it because it's a shallow cardboard cutout piece of shit with an awful generic script and character arcs that blow over in the breeze. I'm assuming, Chris, your overall review before we get into the nitty-gritty of pulling this thing apart isn't too far dissimilar based on your opening comments.
No, not at all. Yeah, completely. I completely agree. It's too long in the sense of because I'm someone that and all this shit is personal as well. So like a lot of people think The Irishman is too long. I didn't actually think like Dan. If I think a movie's fine to be that long, I don't mind. I didn't mind The Irishman at all. I thought it was sorry, it had flaws. Obviously, there's scenes where Robert De Niro is a 20-year-old who walks like a Robert De Niro year old. But actually, in terms of length, didn't bother me at all. So, like Dan, it's not about that, but it's like fuck me. There's half an hour where the antagonist just disappears, and we're just like we're getting to the nitty gritty. But yes, I completely agree with that. It's too long. It's too thin. It glosses over huge things and then spends so much screen time on things that are inconsequential. Yeah. There's big ideas that are explored in one scene only. An hour in, there's another unobtainium, needlessly, randomly, that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't get brought up again. Come on, Cameron, you could just not bring actors back if you wanted. Like, that's fine. That's an option. Yeah. You don't need to do these convoluted things which contradict previous movies. I think one of them is
fine and one of them is deeply fucked.
Yeah, and we'll get to all of it. But yes, my experience watching it. And the thing is right from the off, like right from the beginning, Jess and I were like, huh? There's like a montage which races through a load of shit and stuff that should really be explained more is just brushed over, and then that just continues. And I think, sorry, blame this movie. The other thing is like it doesn't. Sorry, forgot what I was going to say. Length doesn't something. Words. I don't know what my words are, Dan. The length of the I agree. It's basic. Oh, that was it. Yeah. And the other thing, and one constant thing, because I watched a bunch of this morning as I was getting ready. I was flicking through like reviews of people that I admire and usually agree with, and everyone's got their own personal opinion. That's fine. But a lot of people praising this movie, not Mark Komodo, however you say his name.
I think it's just Commode, but yeah.
Commode. If you don't like this movie, I would definitely recommend watching Mark Commode's review. It's amazing.
What's funny about that is he was very. I was there the night they screened this for the press, and when he visited, I think he saw it twice. I think he came for the premiere too. But he was so good at hiding how he felt about the movie. He was chatting with everyone, having big smiles. He did not, I was surprised to discover Mark Commode didn't like the movie after being present for the screenings.
His review is amazing. But everyone's one of the things is, it looks amazing, and there are scenes in this movie that look beautiful, but even the visuals, I'm like, there's scenes that don't quite look right to me in my eye. Maybe I'm wrong.
You're spot on.
So that's my. I agree. Yes, I also would not necessarily recommend this movie.
No. No, it's a bad movie. So let's do the obvious thing then, like, and sort of like we'll start from where we just left off, which is let's talk about the visuals, because the visuals, we've talked about this before. This is the reason these movies do so well is people go, well, you got to see it in the cinema, right? Because and it's the same logic, even if you don't care for the story, it's the same logic I used to why I saw this in the cinema. If I'm gonna have to sit through this at some point in my life, I best do it with the visuals, right? Big, sparkly, Dolby, Atmos, all the bells, whistles. I want to see it in the biggest screen, the sharpest screen, the best colors, 3D. Give me everything, right? Just to distract me from the paper thin plot. And that'll be enough. Like going on a roller coaster or, a theme park ride of some description. But they even fucked that up, Chris. Really badly. Because he wanted to experiment.
You talk about the frame rate.
Yeah, I'm talking about the frame rate. Now, luckily, the Disney Plus version doesn't have the higher frame rate. Thank fuck. Because what they chose to do... Now, I saw back in the day when Peter Jackson was experimenting with higher frame rates, I saw The Hobbit in the higher frame rate. And while I did think it looked weird and kind of like a TV show or a soap, it just made it look cheaper somehow to my eye. In the end, I just adjusted to it. And by the end of the movie, frame rate was not really a thing I was... wasn't taking me out of the film. First 10, 15 minutes maybe, but mostly I just didn't notice. The decision that was made for this movie, and I will literally never understand, was to just shoot certain scenes in the higher frame rate, and not the entire sequence, just certain shots within certain scenes. Meaning the frame rate is jumping forward and back and forward and back, 24 frames, 48 frames, 24 frames, 48 frames, between shots. It is the most irritating thing to my eye I have ever witnessed. And I actually wanted to walk out and just wait for a different screening. Like, it was that bad. It was that irritating. But it turns out any screening of this in 3D that wasn't the bog standard real 3D, so the IMAX 3D, the Dolby 3D, any true 3D screening that used dual projectors used the higher frame rate. And that was just such a fucking shitty thing to do, both in the choice initially and then to make that my only option if I want to see it in a decent level of 3D, because I don't care for what's called real 3D, which is when they take an old projector that didn't do 3D and they strap a box on the front of it that has a prism in it that splits the image into the two. You lose light. It's one projector's worth of light power split into two images, which is just a nightmare. Whereas
is that why you lose so much light? I never knew that.
Mm-hmm. It's why they're so.
Because I hate
they
it.
look dim. They look dim, and that's why.
Oh, I know. We've talked about it before and Take a Shot, but it really bothered me when we watched Day of the Doctor 50th anniversary in the cinema, and it was so dim. Like,
yeah. And I know exactly which screen that was in. That was Screen 7 at the Odeon in Kingston, and I know for a fact that's a single projector. Whereas if you see IMAX 3D in a screen that has a dual projection system, not all of them do check ahead of time, or the Dolby screens, which again are mostly the laser ones, are dual projectors. The 3D, because it's two projectors doing the two images, they maintain their brightness, and in fact they tend to go over the standard brightness to compensate for the glasses, because the glasses take a bit of the color and light out of it as well when you're wearing them. So the best way to watch this in 3D had the shittiest frame rate. So you were damned if you do, damned if you didn't. The headache-inducing single projector 3D with a normal frame rate, or the fancy functional 3D with the shitty frame rate. What a disaster of a release this was, in my opinion. There was no ideal way to watch this movie at all. Then, if we're just on the visuals in general, I honestly, for the amount of time that's passed between the two, I don't think there is a significant enough jump in image, in visual, in the visuals to really, for this to be like groundbreaking. It definitely looks a lot better than the first one. The textures are more detailed. You can sort of see the pores in their skin and stuff. And if you take any single frame out of this movie, it looks beautiful. The problem is often movement. When they couldn't get the actor or the creature to do it, so either the creature doesn't have a real-world equivalent. So like in the first movie, the horses, there's sort of horse creatures that live on Pandora that they ride, that are ground not the bird ones, but the ones that are actually just like on the ground. In the first movie, they looked okay when they were stood and the actors were just like mounting them or whatever. But as soon as they were full gallop, they looked weird because you can't get a horse full gallop in a studio, right? So they had to just CGI that, and then they looked floaty and looked weird. Same thing is true in this movie. Within the first, 30 minutes, there's a scene where they approach one thing on horses. And when they're galloping, they look floaty and they look weird. And as soon as they're stationary, and they've obviously just brought horses in to animate over, they look fine. And it's the same here. When it's the actors in a scene that have been filmed in a tank, their movements look right. They have the correct weight, all of that jazz. It all goes to pot when they start having to guesstimate the movements because they didn't get the shot and they've done it completely in CGI, or it's a creature that has no real-world equivalent. It's not as noticeable with the fish for obvious reasons. They're kind of floaty anyway. That's kind of what's happening. But it is noticeable with pretty much any land creature, or when the fish interacts with the land. There's a scene where the middle child brother is caught in like a reef and he's being attacked by like a shark type thing, and it's clearly all CGI. That looks terrible. And the way the rocks are breaking around him, it doesn't feel believable to me.
Oh, that's the one I really noticed. So I was like, I literally turned to Jess and I was like, this feels like a video game cutaway scene. Like, this is... Yep. Really? This is not... That's the exact scene where I was like, huh?
Yeah. It doesn't look good. And I think as well, the other one that caught me, and I think this one is more actually less related to the movements and more related to the textures. It turns out the Na'vi look weird when they're wet. And there's a scene right towards the end of the movie where Jake fights the generic army villain guy, and they're both damp, and it gives them this sort of glossy, sort of rubbery texture, and then they're rolling around fighting, and like it just all looks off. The textures look wrong. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but that's the other scene I thought looked like a cutscene from a video game. But like, yeah, it's so visually.
By the way, obviously cutscenes from video games are looking better and better every year. But this is $1 billion movie or whatever. Like,
right, exactly. And I think for me, like on the visual front, is this so much more staggering than the first one that it's worth an immediate cinema ticket purchase? No. Is the answer. It's still got all the beautiful floaty mountains and the bioluminescence and we'll come to this because I have tried to make an effort to make some positive notes, things I liked about this movie, because I knew after the reaction to this movie being chosen, I was going to be fairly accused of coming in looking to hate this because I was so dismayed by the choice. So I've made an effort. I found a bunch of things I like about the movie. We'll talk about them. But I don't think this is a big enough step up visually to warrant paying for another ticket. It is definitely better. You put them side by side, you'll go, wow, there's clearly been a technological leap in terms of the detail of this, the fidelity of this. But because it's the same location, and they once they switch to the water, obviously we get to do some different visuals to the first movie. But the first hour of this movie, wow, before they get to the other tribe, it really doesn't look massively different to the movie before it. So yeah, I don't know. Were there any other points you had on the visuals? Because that was one of the things I was gonna like have a rant about because of the frame rate thing, which you luckily escaped as a problem.
Yeah, but I came across it in a lot of the reviews. It's why I knew about it. Look, there are moments where the visuals look amazing, as Dan's already said, and they are undeniably inventive. A lot of the water stuff looks amazing, both onshore and in the water. And as always, the textures and colours. It's interesting though because it does feel very much like the same world, but just water, which is potentially either a negative thing in the fact that it feels, as you say, very visually similar despite the advances in technology. Maybe a positive in that you want it to feel like Pandora, and you get more of a sense of scope, I think, in this film and scale. I think the robots still look like robots and all of that sort of stuff. I will say this on the visuals, and I don't know if it's potentially going to dip into trivia. But obviously, a lot was made of the filming underwater, and we've seen those behind the scenes images of Kate Winslet and stuff like that. Do you think that was worth it? Do you think that paid off?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think that.
I don't know. I don't know if you've got. I don't know if you've got Triv on how they did that. That's why I say about it.
Not so much. I mean, they just filmed. They literally just filmed them underwater. Like, there's not a huge amount to talk about in that other than that. That's what they did. They basically had big vats of water, had them under it. We don't know. The movie's not been out long enough for us to have had all the technicals. Because I remember when we did, there was another movie we covered where we talked about like the fact they filmed in a vat and it had this many, cubic inches of water in it, whatever. We don't have anything quite like that, but yeah, they did shoot a lot of real, the actors in water to get realistic floating. I think, to be fair, I admire that. I mean, it does seem like James Cameron's determined to drown someone on set of one of these movies. This is his third movie doing this after Titanic and The Abyss, and there were accidents on both the Titanic and Abyss set that nearly killed people. So he really took a risk doing this a third time. Very grateful everyone is alive and well, and that he didn't nearly drown someone this time. If we ever get to The Abyss and Titanic, I'll tell you those stories because I know about those. They're fucking insane. But yeah, I do think it helps. I think there is, when I talk about the problems with these movies often being the weight of how things move when they're CGI, I think getting a convincing level of that is good. It's the sort of thing that will go unappreciated if nailed, but you'd notice if they hadn't bothered. Does that make sense? Like, it's one of those things that if it's doing its job right, you're not noticing it. Like like when they're swimming in the water, I never felt, well, that's fake CGI water. That's just a person on strings and they've animated the water around them, which is what I would be feeling, I think, if they'd done it that way. So to go to the effort of putting them underwater and filming them underwater properly and floating in water tanks, I think that's smart. And I think that has paid off in ways that we would never really be able to appreciate because the alternative won't exist. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think they were right to do that. I think I admire his dedication to a practical thing in a movie where it would have been cheaper and easier and safer and all of those things to just go, let's stick them on strings. You know what I mean? Like, let's not make anyone actually get in tanks of water, shall we? So yeah, I think it worked out well, and I think it does give them weight when they're swimming around. I think some of the scenes underwater are some of the movie's best. So yeah, I think that paid off in the end.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering. Yeah, I think the same. I think it's funny that. I guess it adds. I guess you can link this to visuals or a main point, but there is a character who maybe this links into us talking about this. So spoilers, obviously, from the off. Sigourney Weaver's back. She's back as Grace. Because
she's not Grace. She's a different character now. What's she called? She's called Kiri. Kiri.
As Grace, sorry, I didn't say as Grace's daughter. Sorry, I took too big a pause. Tired. As Grace's daughter, Kiri, because her deceased avatar gave birth to her, which is as much explanation as we get at the beginning. Just then, her feelings towards it and the mystery surrounding it are then explored a little bit. Well, they're not really explored. There's just scenes where this is a mystery, people, and it will remain as such, presumably until a later movie. And let's talk about that decision in a sec, but just visually, she's the only actress listed as performing that role. And I don't know whether she just did a voiceover or whether she was on set performing the role. I don't know if you have that information.
I do know that, yes.
Okay, so what's the answer?
So she was on set. She ran around with the kids.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, fine then. Because you just go, how much do these performers need to be here almost? But then again, I don't know. I don't know enough about the technical ways in which they captured it.
I think the reason these movies look so much better than other almost entirely CGI movies is because they film real actors on sets performing these scenes and then animate over them. I think one of the reasons that they never have, or not never have, but rarely have the floaty problem that you get when you watch a movie like The Lion King, when the animals sometimes looked a bit floaty when they galloped around, or even in these movies when they don't have footage to work off, like I mentioned earlier with the galloping horses, when it can look a bit weird and floaty and the weight's just never quite right. It's just very hard to trick the human eye of real physics. We're very, very sensitive to our own the physics of the world around us. It's all we know, and the rules are very consistent. So when something is just fractionally off, you can't pin it, but it's just slightly wrong. And I always find it comes out in Spider-Man movies really badly, because obviously they want him bouncing around, and often they feel like because his character is sort of a gravity-defying character anyway, because he can leap huge amounts, that he doesn't need to have the same weight as a person. But it just bothers my eye every time, and I don't think I've ever, the closest a Spider movie has ever come to making me believe the swinging is really not just happening in a computer. It was the first Amazing Spider-Man, and that's because they did a lot of it practical, and they really did swing stuntmen across New York skylines, which is really cool.
And with that in mind, then I do compliment the visuals, especially on the characters.
Right.
Like Sam Worthington's character looked as good as Sigourney Weaver's. Presumably, Sam Worthington's character looks closer to Sam Worthington, so from a CGI perspective, you would expect maybe him to look better than Sigourney Weaver's character. Nope, both looked exactly the same. The people always look great in this. Although equally, you do kind of like. I was really excited about Kate Winslet because I really like Kate Winslet as an actress. I always enjoy her performances, and it's sort of like it. I was like, is that Kate Winslet? Like, it took me a while to be like, oh, that is Kate Winslet. Okay,
she definitely vanishes into that role a lot more than like Sam Worthington does, because his looks and feels a lot like him as a Na'vi, whereas the others, it's like they've created a character for them to inhabit, and it's interesting that they felt. I feel like in the first movie they did all of them the Sam Worthington way, whereas in this movie they were maybe more confident with the tech to sort of go, well, we can keep the facial expressions, but we can sort of change how they look so it's not as recognizably them, and they can get a bit more lost in their character. And I think that's like super interesting that they've chosen to do that. And obviously you can't now change the characters from the first movie and how they looked, because they have an established appearance. So you can't make Jake Sully no longer look like Sam Worthington, because you've already committed to that choice. But I think it's really interesting for the people they introduced in this movie. They sort of like were a bit more free to make adjustments to their face structure and bone structure to sort of like make them look a little different. So in some cases, make them look a little more alien. I think it works though. It works really well.
Yeah, no, it does, and it's one area of the visuals that I think in particular works really well, and I'd really compliment.
Yeah,
do you want to? Sorry, go.
Well, I just want on that point very quickly, and again, it's the same thing as the water thing. It's like, it's a huge amount of work and effort to bring these actors onto the set and film them with this equipment that's like tracking their face movements, but also their body movements, and then their body movements underwater. Like all these actors being present and like filming like a film for a movie that is ostensibly to the eyes of a lot of the viewers an animated movie is remarkable. And the commitment to that, when the studio could save an awful lot of money by just going, can't we just do all this in a computer? Do we need a lot? Can we not just pay, Zoe Saldana to do the voice work? Like, and it's not just about the actors as well. It's about that's a production. That's studio time. It's space. It's the equipment that you have to attach to them. The tech that tracks the face movements. It's an extremely expensive process. Is that worth it? I mean, I'd say for this franchise, yeah, because the reason people pay to see this in cinemas rather than waiting for Disney Plus is because it looks better than any other movie of its kind.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
People didn't get out of their houses in waves to see Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, and there's a reason.
Let's use Sigourney as a jumping off point, because Dan, she's not the only character returning, is she?
No, well, okay, so there's two characters returning, and I think one's a bigger issue than the other, and I'm going to actually maybe surprise you here. I think Sigourney Weaver is returning as the daughter of Grace is the bigger problem. I love Sigourney Weaver to bits. I think she's a wonderful actress, and I think they animated the character with all the youth and vigor of a child. But Sigourney Weaver is a lady of Sigourney Weaver age, and her voice cannot hide that. You cannot hide it at all in her voice. In the entire movie, I just kept thinking, did this child smoke a lot of cigarettes? And again, all due respect to Sigourney Weaver, this is not her fault. This is very much Cameron's choice. I don't know why. Why not? Okay, you can still have that character be a birth of Grace, why bring her back? She's 70 years old. Well, she's 70 something years old. She would have been about 70, I think, when she shot this movie. Why? Is it just dedication to Sigourney? Is it just love of the actress and just, well, I'm going to keep giving her a paycheck and work? In which case, like, I respect that. Fine. Maybe think of something different for her to do. Like, if you can make the Na'vi look different to the actresses and actors now, as we proved sort of with the Kate Winslet one, maybe give her a new role. Right? You can just give her a new role. Like, it's fine. But this choice is insane. For a few reasons. One, I know that they've left it as a big, mystery box of, like, where did she come from? Who was her dad? Why has she got all these extra powers and all this connection to the forest and stuff? Is she just a reincarnation of Grace? What's the deal? There's some weird shit going on there that they're probably going to get to next week. In fact, there's a quote somewhere I've got in my trove of Cameron saying as much. But what does she add to this movie? Because I'm going to tell you right now, the answer is fucking nothing. And she's a distraction because it's that voice coming out of a small child every single time. I am much more willing to believe that if you've got the technology to create a body to put someone's mind in the way of an avatar, that you could put someone's mind into a little server and then stick it in a body after they've perished in real life. That seems way more within the realms of what's going on in this world. And it is a bit course correction because it feels like the previous movie ended with two choices they had to unpick immediately in the start of this movie, and that's killing off Stephen Lang's character, generic army guy, generic army, I don't know what villain, generic army villain, Gav. We'll call him Gav. Generic army villain, Gav himself. So they brought Gav back and they unpicked they sent them packing. So they come home immediately. So the movie opens and the first two things that we reveal, the Sky people are back and Gav is back, but in an avatar body. At least that's an interesting idea that they brought him back, because now he's back in the body of the thing he hates, right? The thing he, wanted to kill last time, the creatures that were in the way of his goal. That's somewhat interesting. The movie does something with him, unlike Kiri, the Grace facsimile, who will presumably be relevant in a later movie, I guess. It's just, what a weird choice. So yeah, I personally didn't like the Kiri thing. I was less bothered by them bringing back Gav. I'm guessing from your tone that you were the other way around.
Yeah, I didn't mind Miles, by the way. I've looked it up. I didn't mind.
His name's short. It's not.
Miles. I wasn't.
What?
Yeah, his name's Miles.
That's not what they call him in the movie, though. It must be like an army thing where they call him his surname. They don't call him Miles. No one's like, Miles.
Maybe I can't say his surname. Koritz?
Oh, yes. Okay, that is what they call him. They call him his surname. They don't call him Miles. That's hilarious.
I'm going to call him Miles. Miles is closer than Gav, isn't it?
Yeah, generic army villain. I'll stick with though. He's Gav. He's Gav.
Yes, I didn't bump up against the voice problems as much as you with Sigourney Weaver. I definitely I started at the beginning trying to make notes, and the first thing I wrote back was, really, like, we don't. I appreciate the loyalty, but we don't need to bring these actors back, Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually just credited as Quaritch, which is interesting. He's not even credited as Miles Quaritch. He's just credited Quaritch. But yeah, I guess that is the character's full name. There you go. You learn something new every day.
I just felt James Cameron was almost being a bit too loyal in both instances with both of them. Like I say, the voice of Sigourney didn't bother me as much. I think the issue I have with Gav, Miles, or Quaritch is that I just felt it went against who that character was in the first movie. Like, the notion of that guy being willing, and there's an interesting angle of it, which is hates the Na'vi, wants Jake to spy, doesn't like them, they're the enemy, but actually when it comes to that or death, he's quite cowardly and he'd rather just stay in the fight, and he's taking that option instead of death. Or maybe cowardly is the wrong word, but yeah. I think and him being in this body, but he can't stand it, and he hates it, and he hates that when connecting with the bird is a thing that he doesn't want to do and all that sort of stuff. But the movie doesn't do that. This is just literally the cheapest way of bringing him back, and I just think that's what bothered me. Like as a story beat, as a character beat, I just thought it made no fucking sense.
I think maybe this is where we differ, because I actually thought it made perfect sense from a character beat. This is an army guy that lost and clearly didn't see that as as a possible outcome. Like he in the video at the beginning of the movie, when it's the old version of Gav, I've already forgotten his actual name, Miles Gav, whatever. The old version of him is like, I don't even know why I'm recording this. I ain't gonna die. Like, this is a pointless act. You know, to see him forced into this body, then go out there, see his own body, and almost sort of go, well, bounding in, relying on our strategies, our approaches, I lost. That guy lost. So maybe I need to be a little bit smarter about this. Maybe I need to be more tactical about this. Maybe I need to think like Jake Sully thinks. And Jake Sully won last time by learning more about this planet. I fought him on his ground, essentially, in a fight with his tactics. So I, as a person who wants to win more than anything, I'm willing to figure out how to fly on those stupid bird things, how to, do this, how to do that, in order to win. Because that's my goal, right? Catch him, beat him, win that. Now, the problem is, and this is where I think we do cross over in agreement, I don't think the movie it makes that explicit enough for it to have been worth it. But I do think it's there in the subtext enough that I picked up on it and was happy enough with that as a reason. I buy the technology element of it, and I even buy the logic of them going like,
yeah, that didn't bother me.
So from my perspective, that didn't feel too lazy, because I just kind of went, there is an interesting character thing there, in my opinion. But whereas I think I do agree with you in that they didn't do enough with it to make it clear, though, to make that land.
Do you buy that during the course of the first movie he had a secret son kicking around?
They were. I don't think it was during the course of the movie. My understanding is they were on that planet for years, and when Jake Sully gets there, they've already been there for a while, right? Like Stephen Lang and the other guys.
Yeah.
So I reckon, I think there was some supplemental material to this, like a comic or a book or something that clarified he was sleeping with one of the pilots from the first movie. But like, even if that's not canon or whatever, the idea that there was just someone on that base he hooked up with and there was a child, yeah, they were on there for years. People are gonna sleep together. Kids are gonna be born. Maybe they were a couple. Maybe at night after being an army guy, he went back to his quarters where his wife and kid were, and he was like, Jesus, another tough day today. That Jake Sully's making my life real hard,
Here's a technology question then, because I'm with you. I don't think the technology aspect of it is an issue at all.
No, it makes a weird amount of sense. As you said, in a world where you can already take someone's mind out of their body and put it in a fake body, why can't that just be like that could just be done? Surely.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how it's also it would have been a way of getting Sigourney back. It's like you could have just done that, but obviously maybe you didn't want to do that twice sort of thing. Yeah, that would have seemed a bit cheap,
especially because I think Grace's character died like a noble death, so I don't think you want to undo Grace's death. Whereas I do feel a bit like he regretted killing off Gav.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The technology exists, and her body is there in a tank being preserved. I think he very much could undo that at a later movie if he wants, can't he?
Yeah, well, and also it's worth adding, I should say, like they make it very clear they made a copy of his brain before he went to battle. That's how this was possible. Whereas I guess at that point, when Grace died, she didn't know she was going off to die that day. That was before it really kicked off. So I guess you could argue she would have had to have been aware enough of the possibility of her death to make a copy of her brain, shortly before. I don't know. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think that's a bigger stretch to me than bringing generic army villain back.
Yeah. But here's a question in terms of this technology being available. Do they cover in the movie why they've not just made Spider an Avatar?
They don't, but I think the reason for that's fairly clear.
Well, he's too young and all that sort of stuff.
No, I think it's so the Sky people, the humanity came with their technology, made a bunch of avatars. They were made on Earth, I think, and then transferred to that planet. And if you remember rightly, there's a whole thing about only you have to have one specifically catered for you. So the reason Sam Worthington got pulled in last minute is because they'd made an avatar for his brother, but his brother had died. And the only other person that could have a chance of doing it. So these things are really hard to make, and they were made on Earth with Earth technology, I believe. Or even if they were made on Pandora, it was still with Earth technology. And after everyone left, I guess the tech was still trashed from the big fight. Because they're not even in that base anymore. When we see them in this movie, they're off in the woods. The two science guys that survived the first movie, only one of them has an avatar, and it's the guy that already had an avatar from the previous movie, not the other guy. I forget the characters' names. I don't remember. I nearly did a joke at the start of this movie and said, Chris, you've just watched Avatar: Way of the Water. Name more than 3 characters. Because I reckon anyone can do Jake, Neytiri, and Spider, because that's such a weird name to give that child. And then you go in, oh Christ, almost immediately, which is funny because the movie has 1,000 characters. So
yeah, never mind naming the characters. There are points in this movie where I think it's fair to be legitimately confused as to which young brother is doing what. Which son is doing what.
At the beginning of the movie, yes, but then you quickly realize the movie is about the middle child brother, not the oldest brother. And I think once that clicks in, I got a lot. The first 2 or 3 scenes with them, I was like, wait, which one is the one that's always disappointing dad, and which one does the dad like? We'll talk about that later, because Jesus Christ, that storyline, fuck me. One of the most unearned moments in cinema history in this movie relating to that storyline. We'll come back to it. So yeah, I don't mind them bringing Quaritch back. I don't think they do enough with him, if I'm being honest. In terms of if you're gonna do that idea, it is interesting to me that he has to, and it's actually, I'll be honest with you, it's in my things I liked about this. I like him learning the ways of the Na'vi. They could have done a better job of explaining why. He links his death to his dismissal of the Na'vi culture, and now he sees that understanding it is valuable. Why not have him express that? The movie sort of skims past the idea or sort of touches upon it without ever getting into any greater depth. And I think a few conversations maybe between him and Spider would have, one, convinced me they were bonding, because the movie failed utterly to do that. It tried. Ugh. It failed miserably. But it would have also then established his character's choices and made it seem a little less like it's this guy's just had a 180 for no reason whatsoever, which is how it feels in certain points of the movie if you're not willing to make that little jump with the film. So yeah,
the spider and whether he's bonding with his dad, not bonding with his dad, agreeing with his dad, going along with it, against them for the Na'vi, is one of the worst executed elements of the movie. Yeah. It's awful. You just don't know. You don't know what's going on with him. It just feels inconsistent. And it just feels like, a lot of time passes in this movie, and you're just kind of going.
You don't need to tell me that twice, mate. Jesus Christ.
You'd make him those characters would be right, either get dressed and get on board, or we're just locking you up. The notion that he's just roaming around with them when he's sort of on side, sort of not, and that's not some sort of clever plan on his part. It's just inconsistent. I don't mind him saving him at the end. That's fine. That's that's
you know what? I don't
instinct
even,
and whatever.
I don't even mind him saving him. but being like, "Nah, I'm still done with you," and going off back to Jake
Mm.
Sully.
No, I don't.
I actually think that's one of the more consistent choices he makes in the movie. He's still too good a person just to let him die, but that doesn't mean he's going to go with the guy that threatened the Na'vi and has clearly proved himself to be evil. I actually think that is the most shockingly consistent bit of character writing for Spider the whole movie, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I didn't mind that at all. I mind the implications of Jake Sully's son for a son line.
Oh my god!
Because
Fuck
I'm
off.
like, okay, what are you? So you called Spider a stray cat, literally, is what you refer to him as at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. And also, so what are you saying, that you've got him back? So it's son for a son. It's okay that the other son's dead. It just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I literally wrote on my notes, "Son for a son. What the fuck is this movie smoking?" I think like that's what's weird about that moment is obviously earlier in the movie, that's a reference to the standoff, right? When they've both got knives to each other's children, a son for a son, right? But it's like. It makes no sense in this context whatsoever. It's just the writer just felt real smart and real clever. Like, it's a reference to a thing that was already said. And it is like a son for a son, because one son has died and now he's accepted Spider. Why? What changed? Fucking nothing. It takes me back to my most unearned moment in the entire movie, right? Cheap, unearned, shallow bullshit. The entire movie, Jake is like, which son is this? Oh, it's the middle son. You're a dick. You're shit. You're useless. You're crap. Get out my face. 10 minutes later in the movie, he sees that son again. We repeat that same fucking beat. That scene is in this movie in 7 different ways, where the middle child does anything at all, and Jake basically just says, "You're a fuck up," in so many words, right? That happens 7 times in this movie. Then at the end of the movie, he helps him get out of one situation, and he goes, "I see you, son. Fuck off. Fuck right off, movie. You did not earn that at all. In a better movie where he really had proved himself, done something to like show you spiritually or like as a person who he is, not just a useful skill." Because all that says to me is like, this is basically the equivalent of a movie about a carpenter who wants his son to be a carpenter and he's shit at carpenting and he can't, he tries to make a spice rack and it looks like the one Homer Simpson made, and he's like, "Son, you're shit," and then he tries to make a chair and it falls apart. It's like, "Son, you're shit." And then at the end of the movie, he makes one good thing and he's like, "You're all right by me, son." And it's like, well, no one learned anything, because all he's done is the same thing he's done all movie, which is value his child by his achievements, not by his personality or just by, loving your child. Like, what a shitty character doing a shitty thing. And they want me to feel emotional in that moment when he says, "I see you, son." The music rises, he puts his hand on his shoulder. The actors are doing their best to make it something. But let me tell you, it's fucking nothing. And what an embarrassment of a scene that is. What an absolutely deep, like, so insulting to the audience that they would fall for that and go, "Oh, so beautiful. He sees his son now." It's like, are you paying attention to what's actually happening here? Because let me tell you, he might be saying those words, but the movie has demonstrated the fucking opposite. Let me tell you. What a fucking shitty moment. Ugh, gross.
Yeah, I see you was awful, and the son for a son was awful. The actual scene where his son is helping him was good. I enjoyed that. There's elements of this there's elements of it that I'm like, oh, come on now. But the third act is probably the best act of the movie. Specifically the kind of water rising. It feels a bit like, well, we've been here before, James, haven't we? Fine, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. My favorite part of this movie is the part when the plot stops for a bit, because the plot's so bad that I was actually just more like, you know what? Let's just learn about the weird water tribe. That's more interesting to me than the plot, because the plot of this movie is nothing. It's cardboard. The plot of this movie actually makes no sense as well. That's the other problem, is if we're going to do like, okay, you're an army, right? You've landed on a planet, but the natives are giving you a lot of trouble, right? Doing the things you want to do. They've got a leader, yeah? And you're thinking, that leader, if we take him out of the picture, we're on easy street, right? You nearly kidnap his kids, and he goes to ground. He's gone. Other side of the planet, basically. Psst! You've won! He's gone! He's retired! Problem solved, no? Why are we putting all these resources into chasing him when he doesn't want to be found? He's out of your way! This is insane! Why is the army chasing one man?
Because, Dan...
Bollocks!
because, well, one, personal vendetta against...
For Gav, sure. What about the rest?
Yeah.
He goes to them and asks for a shit ton of resources to chase him across the planet. They give him that stuff. Why?
Yeah. Yes, but you're forgetting, Dan, about that one scene where, as well as chasing him against all over the planet, they can also get the de-aging liquid from...
They're already doing that.
Whale.
They're already doing that. They say to Gav, we've got a whaling operation. You can sort of like, they're out that way. You can sort of like team up with them if you want. Like, you know, fine. You can borrow them. But this is what's most insane. They take the whaling guys who are making the de-aging magic thing that's worth billions of dollars off of their task to chase down a former leader of a tribe that were giving them trouble that's gone to ground. So they stop whaling, the thing that's earning them money, to chase Jake Sully. This movie makes no sense, Chris. Why?
I know, Dan. I know.
Why? So, for me, weirdly, as much as the action in the second act and some of the family drama of, like, you know, like, they kidnap my kids and all that stuff is reasonably functional, I honestly think my favourite section of the movie is the middle act, where it sort of forgets that plot that doesn't work and is just about Jake and his family trying to fit in with this other society. That's some of my favourite stuff in the whole movie, truthfully.
It wasn't mine, because from my perspective, of seeing it for the first time, I'm like, well, this feels like it's slowing down things a little bit.
Yeah. Look, if you were looking to tighten up this movie, that's probably the section that takes the biggest cut for sure. But yeah, I think in terms of like stuff I was interested in or stuff that I liked, that's mostly in that portion of the movie, I think.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. That makes sense, and that's fair. But from my point of view, I was like, you know, it's like half an hour where we don't even see Gav. Yeah. Forgotten about Gav? We're not. Okay, fine. And you could have done some... Yeah, man, it's long. This movie's long. But what's insane for me is, like, how basic the plot is. If you were talking someone through the beats of this movie, like, there are much shorter movies that would take so much longer to explain. Like, Batman v Superman. The beats of that movie are insane. And it's like an hour less than this movie.
You know what's interesting, though, is it also somehow, while feeling paper thin, feels overstuffed. Because there's also a lot going on. Just none of it has any depth. So it's like, think about all the plots that are happening in this movie, right? So we've got Jake having his whole, I've got to protect my family by running away thing. And the quote-unquote arc is at the end of the movie, he goes, we're not going to run anymore. This is where we make our stand. Which, by the way, can I just say, bullshit. Next movie is going to open with him running away and seeing the fire Na'vi who live in a volcano. Watch this space. I'm not fucking kidding you. I'm telling you right now. Mark my words. That's the next movie. I'm just tick that one off right now. Predictable as fucking all shit. Anyway, doesn't matter. Or being driven out of this home and going to meet the fire Na'vi and live with them. And learn their ways. It'll be called The Way of the Fire. I don't know, whatever. Doesn't matter. So Jake's arc is that at the beginning of the movie, because he's got kids now, he's made a different choice to what young Jake would have done, and he runs. Young Jake was a fighter. Adult Jake with responsibilities and children chooses to run. And at the end of the movie, he's like, no, I've learned I need to take a stand. I guess you could call that an arc. But while that's happening, we have Kiri, who's on her weird spirit quest. We have the plot of the Water People, which is that, you know, they've had to take in Jake at risk to their families, and then they had to take a stand at the end of the movie. We've got the fucking space whale and his entire backstory of being outcast from space whale culture. We've got Spider's sort of journey alongside Gav's entire story, which is all about chasing down Jake and stuff. And at the same time as all of that, then we've got like space whaling guys whose mission, you know, it was two of those, and one of them like thinks they're doing a terrible thing, one of them's doing the right thing, and then one of them gets their comeuppance. And then we've got all of the bullshit stories with the, well, I say bullshit. Some of the kid stuff is some of the stuff I like the best, but we've got the two sets of kids that aren't getting on at first and having bickering, and then they are. And then we've got Jake's entire relationship with his second son. Then we've got Natiri's plot about losing her child. Like, there's so much happening in this movie. So why is it so shallow? It's so
especially
weird.
when so much of that stuff, like when you go, oh, there's those kids that don't get on, and then they are. It's basically as quick as that. Like it's literally that.
Well, I mean, see, this is the one section that, I mean, let's talk about, I'll quickly do some of the stuff I like, right? I like the middle of the section of the movie, right? I like, first of all, just learning about the water Navi. They're really interesting. They've got like thicker tails and arms for swimming. They have a different skin tone to blend in more efficiently to their environment. They can hold their breath longer. Like the idea that there's evolutionary differences, on board with. I think that's really cool. I like that they have a very different culture. I like this idea that they've got that they're these like squid things they can sort of use to give themselves air when they're underwater. Like they've developed a whole culture around this, and I think that's really that the movie actually does a lot of stuff with that. I also think the movie actually handles the children and the writing of the children in that section really well. The petty bullying and fights, but they're also laughing at each other, but also like actually getting serious and swinging punches, playing pranks on each other that go too far and nearly get one of them killed. Like that all feels weirdly authentic, like genuinely. Like when those kids ditched him, I was like, I could see kids doing something that stupid. I really could. And then like when the moment when middle child could throw the oldest kid from the other tribe under the bus and chooses not to, and that's what kind of brings them together. I think that was actually, I mean, compared to, you know, I see you now, son, much more earned. Like that at least makes sense in context. And I then believed that kid was like, okay, he now sort of respects middle child more because middle child protected him. You know, middle child looked out for him. So those bonds make sense to me, right? And I think I also really enjoyed Jake's handling of his kids in those moments. I love that he really seems to understand his kids well. Like after the fight, he knew exactly which son was responsible. And then there's that great moment. It's one of my favorite moments in the whole movie when he says secretly to the oldest child, he's like, do the other kids look worse? They're like, yeah. He's like, cool. Like it's just such a weird moment of pride from him. And again, that feels super authentic and real. And they do really take a lot of time to showing us the youngest of the Sully family genuinely learning the waterways. So that in the third act, you know exactly why the middle child can teach Jake to breathe underwater. How Grace can do what she can do to help them out of it. It's all established in that middle act. And I actually think, because it's nice to look at and it's kind of serene and the plot, which is deeply annoying, isn't happening, that whole middle section with all the child drama is actually, I think, it certainly on my second watch, was the most functional part of the whole movie to me. I really was like, oh, I'm on board with this. So yeah, those are some things I actually liked about the movie, and they were all in the middle chunk. So there you go.
Fair. There you go. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. But for me, it just felt long. But
I mean, the whole movie feels like that. But the points I was least bothered by that length, when I was like got more engaged with it, was that middle section, because I was just like, I at least appreciate what's happening here.
Yeah, I think for me I felt it there because, as you say, the action pauses kind of to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with like all the sort of the bro and the like. At one point he says, I wrote it down. Hold on. He says,
yeah, we should talk about
it's called. He says it's called a punch, bitch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this because They do quite a lot to talk about how Jake evolves and becomes the Na'vi, but that doesn't feel very Na'vi. So I'm like, has Jake influenced these children? Maybe, but then they're also saying bro and stuff. I'm like, I don't understand how this is so colloquial.
So the movie tries to cover this at the beginning, right? And I want your opinion on this because there's been a lot of debate about this. In the beginning of the movie, Jake says that I now just hear Na'vi as English. And then characters that are speaking Na'vi switch to English. Not because they've actually switched to English. They're still speaking Na'vi, but it's the way the movie has them talking where they don't have to have everything in subtitles. Because realistically, almost all this movie would be in subtitles otherwise, right? So then you sort of go, I'm seeing the movie through the filter of Jake hearing English, right? So, because a lot of people criticize the movie who didn't get that and said, well, shouldn't they be speaking to the water Na'vi in Na'vi, right? They are, as far as I'm aware. They are. It's just that we're hearing it through sort of Jake's experience. Even when he's not present, the movie has shifted so we're understanding it. And I think that's fine, but you then have to leap to Jake's not only hearing it in English, but colloquial like slang English, which is a harder jump, I think, for me. So how did you feel about it? Do you think that is the correct explanation? Do you think that works? Is that sufficient for it's called a punch, bitch?
Yeah, I mean, it's an explanation, and I did write down like the hold on. I just thought that, became like English to him. Excited to see how that pans out for the movie. Oh, because I just had visions of it getting complicated when they were talking to other people. But actually, sort of when they're dealing with Gav and stuff, and they switch back to him hearing it in Na'vi and the use of subtitles and stuff for him, I actually thought they were very consistent with it. They were more consistent than I expected them to be. Yeah. You know what? It's an explanation for it's called a punch, bro. Fine, okay, yeah. I hadn't thought of that as an explanation, but it is one. Like, because that's Jake's translation, and whilst Jake is not in that scene, we're still seeing Jake's translation. Because fundamentally, as you said, Jake's translation thing is just a tool to get them speaking English to make it an easier movie going experience for everyone. Right. So because God, if this film had come out and it was all subtitles, people would have been raging. So
that always broke my brain.
That's
like when I was younger, and when I worked in the cinema, like when I in my younger days, and people would come out of movies it's subtitles, like outraged that a movie would be subtitled, and it just made me break my brain. But the average person really doesn't like subtitles. I have no problem with subtitles, and I don't know if that's just exposure. Just getting used to it, I guess. God, I sometimes listen to stuff in English with subtitles now because sound mixing is so shoddy. So, like, in modern day, like, where the music and the sound effects are just drowning out dialogue constantly. Subtitles are not a problem for me at all.
The big one for me on that is Squid Game. I find it so upsetting to know that some people watch Squid Game dubbed because they didn't want to deal with subtitles.
That is a shame because there were such good performances in that show too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a shame. So, look, I think the other big problem with this movie, and I would rather, look, we could sit here, we could nitpick all day, right, and we could make fun of this movie's equivalent of unobtainium, which is fucking ridiculous, a serum that makes you.
You want a super quick nitpick, Dan?
Oh yeah, please. Let's head to Nitpick Corner. I've got my jacket ready, mate. My jacket was on the minute we started recording because I knew we were going there. Go on, Nitpick Corner me.
They take a fucking photo, Dan. They take a family photo and there's a flash. And there's... Like... What?
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah.
What? Yeah. What's what? Like, and, some of the human stayed. Some of the technology stayed. A camera could have stayed. But the Na'vi are... What? That's not what the... What? What? Yeah. Just have a shot of them as a family. You don't need them posing for a photo that then flashes. Just have them... And they all look weird. Because
Yeah,
it flashes. Someone left
Flash
the
has
flash
that,
on.
yeah, the Flash has that weird effect of making them look really rubbery, which also happens a little bit in the night when they're damp and the water shines off them. It's a bizarre effect. I don't know how it only happens a couple times in the movie. There's something very uncanny valley about that texture. It looks really wrong.
Wait, it's just that opening montage is insane. The stuff we skim over, had a child. Oh yeah, there's also this kid. What? Oh, and this kid was birthed from the avatar of Grace. What? Here's a family photo. What? Why is there a camera and a flash? What is happening here? Like that, the opening 10 minutes of this movie are wild. They're wild.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if we're doing nitpicks, we've got like, why is the main whale hunter allowed to be Australian, but Jermaine isn't allowed to be from New Zealand?
Yep, there's that. Here's one. Here's another one.
They force him to have a weird American accent that doesn't suit him at all. Bizarre choice.
He's great in the movie, but you are distracted because I don't know about you, but I'm like, that's Jermaine Clement. Like, oh, okay, cool. Was he in the first one? Have I forgotten he was in the first one? He can't be in the first one. I don't think Jermaine Clement. It's Jermaine Clement. Like, it's business. Right, I love it though. It's a great performance. Here's another nitpick. It's quite a big one, this actually. The Na'vi obviously going into battle in the beginning. We're good with presumably then in the time between the first movie and this movie. What has Jake just been doing a lot of talks on guns and how they can be quite valuable? Because all of a sudden, the Na'vi are just using guns now, are we? There's a fairly prominent thing in the first movie that they were using bows and arrows, and the point was they were against people with guns, and now they've got guns.
And what's really weird after the first movie as well is that with all the money and resources they have, they've still not figured out to make their flying ships with glass thick enough to resist arrows.
Yeah. Yeah, even though that was
towards
quite
the
a
end.
big,
Yeah, go on, finish that thought, because that's exactly
movie.
right.
Yeah. Well, even
exactly
that,
the problem. They're flying around in ships in the first movie. The arrows are coming right through the glass and killing the pilots. The ships are going down. And I thought, well, this movie they'll have been smart enough. They'll have reinforced the glass. You know, we have glass now on this planet that could probably withstand a big bow and arrow. I'm pretty sure. You know, we have glass that can withstand bullets. So I don't think it's I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that we have glass that can. So stick that on them. You seem to have a lot of money and resources, and it doesn't really happen too much in the movie. But then there's a really obvious one right towards the end, where I think it's Neytiri jumps off one of those like flying things and like shoots an arrow into the window of a ship, and then the ship goes down and crashes on the big ship, and it makes a big explosion. And it's a cool moment, but I could not get past the practicality of that.
No, and speaking, is that Zoe? I can't say
Zoe
that.
Saldana's character, yes.
Is that her character? Yeah. Because speaking of which, one of my favourite comments I heard in a review was, oh yeah, so then he finds, when they're talking about Gav, oh fuck, I'll call him Gav. We're talking about Gav, and they're like, oh, he finds her arrows, and then it becomes a big thing throughout the movie of him, tracing these arrows, and we're heading towards a standoff. And I was like, are we? Like, they don't have a standoff. They don't do anything with that. That doesn't become a thing, those two squaring off with each other and fighting. It becomes all about Jake v. Gav. Like, what? I was like, I don't think that happened. And again, it's just a missed opportunity. And in general, her character, I think, is slightly pushed to the back in this movie in a really
Massively.
negative way. Especially when you could have done more with, her v. Gav.
Yeah, I agree. Because they do the arrow thing is a running thing. They mention it at least 2 or 3 times throughout the movie. She's got a very distinct kind of arrow that she uses, apparently. And he even says at one point, I recognize your calling card, Mrs. Sully. And then later on in the movie, they spot her arrows again, and he knows who it is, and he starts shouting at her. But she's always at arrow's distance from him. They never really come face to face in a way that's meaningful. I mean, I think there's 2 standoffs for the children. I think she's involved in one of them, the one where she has Spider. So there's that scene. They do come face to face in the moment where she has Spider with the knife, and he has her daughter or son, one of them, with the knife, and they're like, son for a son trade. That moment. But like, it doesn't really amount to anything. Other than that, you know, she doesn't. She references he's the devil a bunch of times, and you know, I think this is a very much a Justice for Asami moment for me. Neytiri deeply underwritten in this movie, but to be fair, Chris, my point of bringing up that you could nitpick this movie to death if you wanted, but actually, what I was going to get to saying was the biggest issue for me is the characters. They fail to give any of them an actual functional character arc. I think the closest we get is maybe Jake Sully starting the movie, leaving and running away, and then at the end being like, but I'm not. And that's all just done in dialogue. We don't get that demonstrated by his physical choices. They just tell us that's how he feels at the end of the movie now. But if you think about every other character, do any of the kids learn anything?
No, just the way of water.
Yeah, they don't change as people, though. They learn new skills, maybe, but they don't physically change. Does Neytiri change? Does Gav change? Does Spider change? Does Kiri understand herself any better? Does the middle child do anything when he gets his father's acceptance? Does he learn anything from that? No. He does exactly the same thing he does all movie, and then he gets his father's acceptance.
The movie even tries to pretend that there's development with some of these people. Like, I loved one of my favourite ones of that is the leader of the water tribe at the end where they're like, now we're brothers, and it's this big acceptance thing. I'm like, they've let you live there the whole movie. They've been teaching you the way of the water the whole movie. Like, don't do this big like acceptance bullshit. Like they didn't accept you a long time ago. Kitty is literally halfway through a fucking arc. Like, her arc's going to span all the movies.
Yeah. So I'm sort of sitting here going like, a story functions on character growth. It is an essential part to storytelling. And one of the reasons I think this movie feels so flat is no one grows, barely anyone learns anything. As far as I can tell, most of these characters are unchanged by the events of the movie, and we've ended basically where we started. What did this movie change other than that Jake lost a son? That might, that in another version of this script, might as well have not existed. The oldest child. Because that's the other thing as well. The youngest daughter and the oldest son are nothing. They are nothing. They are wisps of characters. They are literally a collection of sentences that make you go, oh, you're still here. The two children that are characterized, well, three if you're counting Spider, but he's obviously not amongst those children for a lot of the movie. They're separate. Of Sully's actual sort of like children that he's raising, middle child gets characterized as never being able to achieve the approval of his father, and Kiri on her weird sort of like, I don't know who or what I am, her journey to discover herself. Now, neither of those arcs do anything or have anything that happens to them, but it's something. I at least understand who they are as people. Tell me anything about the youngest daughter or the oldest son, other than that he dies.
I will say that the youngest daughter had a great moment of something I talk about. I seem to notice a lot. I think because when I've written stuff, I've really been victim of it. I've done it a lot, and that's why I notice when other people do it, because I'm like, yeah, been there. But the youngest daughter had an amazing moment of, there's a problem here, there's something wrong with the script, so we're just going to have a character say it and pass it off as a joke, is, it's a problem that fundamentally in this movie, the Scullys, what is it, Scully? Scully, isn't it? Or Sully?
Jake Sully.
Sully. The Sullys just repeatedly get captured and then rescued and then captured and rescued. And she has a moment where basically it's like, oh, well, we'll just have a character pointing that out. And the youngest daughter is like, I can't believe I'm tied up again.
Yeah. But that's what's crazy, right? Like, because she exists as a plot tool. She exists to be kidnapped, and the older brother exists to be murdered. They exist for the plot. So when you sit back and look at this movie and go, why doesn't this work? Why don't I feel engaged? Why don't I feel passionate about this? It's not because of the fact that actually the plot kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would they spend so much money on, chasing Jake? Or why didn't they invest some money in arrow-proof glass? None of that is really the problem, because that stuff would be easily overlooked. That nitpickable stuff is easily overlooked when you're invested in the characters and the character story. The reason I think No Way Home gets away with it, despite having a lot of convenient plot beats and things that don't actually quite track if you really sit down. If you want to nitpick No Way Home, you could do it till the cows come home. There's a lot to nitpick in that movie. But the reason people tend not to, generally speaking, although I feel like the mood has shifted on that movie as time has gone on, but I still think the movie works really well. But the reason it got away with it is because the character stuff is really solid and works. Because if you invest people in the characters, they're more willing to overlook that stuff. And I think that's what this movie really fundamentally gets wrong. It's the characters. The plot's not great. We talked about that already. But the real big issue, again, I think you could even almost get over that the plot doesn't really do much if the characters were something and you were invested in them achieving whatever they were trying to achieve. But if you look at the hero's journey as it should be and then try to apply it to this movie, good luck. Just good fucking luck. Because this movie doesn't hit any of the beats of it at all.
One moment that really angered me is I viewed when the son dies. I think and I'm like, oh, am I viewing it differently, or is the movie? I viewed, and I thought it was very effective. I viewed I want to go home as him saying, my dying wish is to return to the forest, right? But the movie it seems to play it as isn't it a shame because he's not happy with the water stuff and he wants to go home. Yes. And then when because I'm like, oh, okay, well, this will be an excuse to go back to the forest to bury him at the end. When he gets a water burial, considering his last line was, I want to go home. I was like, that's mad. Just don't have him say that last line.
And I can tell you that somebody brought that up in the writer's room for this, because there was a small writer's room for this. We'll talk about that later. But that someone else went, I tell you what we'll do then. We'll have weird little flashbacks. When he's returned to Iway or Arway or whatever they call their like god, the spirit of the forest, so to speak. Everyone will have glimpses of him back in his original environment, and they're like interacting with him when they were young. Like it'll be little memories, and he'll be back. He's back in the forest. He's back with nature where he belongs. Blah blah blah. That's how they tried to paper over that. I'm not saying that works, but that's what they tried to do.
Yeah, because they also have him in the forest when they touch the tree of insight or whatever, and they he chats to him and they're in the forest doing that and all that sort of stuff. So I guess they do it that way, but it was really it took the point is it takes emotional weight away from the funeral, because you watch the funeral scene and you're like, but he wanted to go home. Like this isn't what he wanted, is it?
So I've also written a bunch of to what end things. So the outcast space whale, to what end? Kiri's epilepsy, to what end? Because it's probably not epilepsy. Why would we do a plot where we pretend it is? What else did I write to what end on? I had so many of these. I don't know if I've removed some of them. You've done enough. Super shitty thing to say. To what end? Why is that in the script? So after the brother dies, Jake says possibly the shittiest possible thing he could say to the middle child, which is, you've done enough, which basically says this is your fault.
Horrific.
Whale guy gets a gory end. He'll definitely be back with a robot arm next movie. To what end?
Although that moment did make me go, whoa!
Yeah, I mean, he deserved it. He was a monster. And I really enjoyed, do really enjoy they gave Jermaine Clement's character that line there, who's got the harpoon now, which I did enjoy. Yeah. But why did the whale have to have a tragic backstory where he was an outcast from his tribe? What was the purpose of that?
I'll be honest with you, Dan. I don't really understand why he was an outcast. Why? So what did he do?
So, okay, it's a bit complicated, but basically, the whales are a peaceful race. They are so evolved beyond mankind, intelligence-wise. They understand that violence begets violence, and they refuse to engage in violence of any kind, right? Which is why, when they're being hunted, the guy's like, don't they fight back? He's like, no, never. Because they don't. They are culturally peaceful. They are as intelligent, if not more intelligent, than the Na'vi. The movie makes very clear. They just don't speak, so we don't. It's not like they run around talking, but they are as aware of their surroundings and sentient, and they compose music. They do travel the seas, telling stories, spreading stories from tribe to tribe as they visit the different Na'vi. It's again an interesting idea. The movie doesn't really do a lot with it, but so the premise is that this particular space whale, and I know they have a name, I refuse to call her anything but whales because I know that annoys James Cameron. We'll come back to that, but he gets very annoyed if people call them whales, so I'm going to continue to call them whales. The space whales were attacked, and this one snapped and retorted.
Right, okay.
And fought back with and killed people, mankind, in defense, in self-defense. It's where it lost half of its fin, but kept going. But during that attack, other whales were killed, and because they were very good at removing all their equipment once they're done, they make a point later on of saying, "All right, guys, take the tracker and all the stuff off this whale we just killed." And Gav is like, "No, leave it on this time. I want to send a message." The reason they clarify that is because what it is not only did they blame this whale for killing people, they blamed it for killing the other whales that died in that attack. They think he just went mad and went on a killing spree. So he's an outcast from the rest of his whale culture. And later on in the movie, when Middle Child figures that out, he's misunderstood. It was self-defense with humans, and he didn't kill any other whales. But that's kind of the premise. But all of that would be an interesting movie of its own, I think, to a degree. Like, I'm not saying make that movie, but like, why is that in this movie? What do we get out of that in this movie? I'm struggling to understand.
I assume it's bonding. It's bonding the two. It's bonding him and the son, I guess, is the. What's
the ultimate goal of that? What's the goal of that in the script? Just from a purely script perspective, what is the purpose of any of this? Am I supposed to learn something about a character? Am I supposed to learn something about the whales? There's nothing that teaches me that I don't learn about the whales from the other scenes about the whales.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, because I think you could ask that question for the majority of the plot of this movie.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, I also think they attempt to do bonding between Spider and Gav. That doesn't work. I don't buy it. There's a bit when they're teaching each other the language, where he's teaching the language and he's like laughing at him as he's pronouncing things wrong. Come on. Just come on. Let's see. Have I got any other notes? Have you got any other stuff you want to pick apart?
I think I called Sigourney Weaver's character Kitty earlier, and then you called her something else, and I'm like, where have I got Kitty from? So
she's called Kiri. So you got Kitty from Kiri. I think it sounds kind of similar. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Fine. Hold on. Yeah, hold on, because I did make some notes at the beginning. Hold on.
Love it. Let's do Chris's notes. This is a rare treat. Notes from Chris.
I think we've covered most of them. Hold on, for 30 minutes. Yeah, it's 30. But I know that didn't bother you, but I have kind of talked about it. There's just 30 minutes where we don't see Gav at all. But that's your favourite part of the movie. I don't think
depressing as it is to say. I mean, look, if you want to talk more to that, I'm with you. Like in a normal film, stopping the plot for 30 minutes is a bad thing. But the plot in this movie is so obnoxiously bad that actually doing something different that was a little bit more interesting to me, because it wasn't just the last movie again, was like refreshing. It's the only bit of the movie that's not just the previous movie again.
In a way, I don't think it's. Do you think? Because I don't think the whaling, the the trouble is, I just don't know how needed the anti-aging thing is, because it just feels like, well, it's to make a perfectly valid, and I don't know what the right word is. Like, I respect the. James Cameron is not being subtle with his metaphors in these movies, and I sort of, I respect that.
Wait a minute, Chris. Wait a minute, Chris. Are you telling me this movie is woke?
No, I'm not saying that particularly.
This movie better not be woke. If this movie is woke,
Well, the first movie was woke before woke was a thing, so same with this one. But you know what I mean.
Wait a minute, Chris. In a minute, you're going to tell me X-Men is woke. I'm not having this. What's this?
Ugh, fucking hate all that bullshit. Anyway,
Sorry, but for those who don't know, because timing has changed. This is we're recording this the week that they released the trailer for X-Men '97 or whatever they're calling it. And a lot of right-wing reactionary grifter people were very shocked to discover how woke it was, only to be reminded that the X-Men is basically couldn't have been more woke if they tried from day one, thus exposing the stupid grift.
I just hate the Barbie's woke. It's never gonna be a success. It's never gonna be a success. Barbie's made like $1 billion. Oh well, we'll just quietly shut up about Barbie now. Or I can't remember her name, but the woman in the Mandalorian who
Gina
was
Carano.
just. Gina Carano, who was just criticized. Oh, her character's woke. Why does her character need to exist? Such a bad character, who is now being heralded as a hero by these people. I'm like,
my favorite right turn, like sort of where they just, spam the car around to try and make their logic work, was Mario. Mario was woke nonsense until it made $1 billion or whatever it made this year, and all of a sudden Mario wasn't woke. It was a great anti-woke movie. Politics, no politics in Mario. It wasn't woke at all. And it was like, oh, when the trailers were coming out before it had been released and made a boatload of money, you guys were insisting it was a woke movie that had Peach as a hero or whatever. You changed your tune pretty quickly. These people have no shame. That's the problem. We assume they work on the principles we do of having shame. They don't.
Yeah, it's mad.
Anyway,
it's mad.
Back to the movie.
So I appreciate, that the aging liquid thing is there for some, and that scene where they go after the whale is horrific. It's awful, yes. and like I say, the metaphor is not hidden, and I respect that, and that scene I think is very harrowing. But I am also sat there going, but they're still after unatanium or whatever. It just feels It feels like, oh, well, we're in a different part of Pandora now, so they need to also be after something related to this part of Pandora. I feel like you've created that problem there. You could have just, Gav's after him, and that's why they're there, but then you don't get the metaphor. I don't know, but I just felt a bit...
Yeah, It's a contrived way to get the second act of the movie to happen, isn't it? Because you got an element of so in the last movie they were trying to protect the sacred tree. In this movie they're trying to protect the sacred whales. It's not like. But how many plots can you do with this, in this world where because obviously the whole purpose of this is to have that message of the military-industrial complex is not great, and maybe we shouldn't be destroying all of nature, which is absolutely a valid thing to make a movie on the subject of. But the problem is he's created a world where that's really almost the only story he can tell in it, which is going to be a problem for these sequels they're working on, I think, because there's only so many versions of that story you can do where it's not going to feel weird and forced, like in this movie where you make the whales have a magic serum inside of them that's valuable to humans. So they're going to go around killing the whales and humans are bad. We got that from the first movie. I don't know if we needed a new reason to dislike the humans in this movie, but sure. Yeah. I mean, I will say, in a negative angle on the middle section, it is worth saying that the Sea Clans are their own thing, but Jake does kind of have to do an Avatar 1 again and sort of learn their ways, but now it's the ways of water or whatever. I mean, you could argue that's also a retread of the first movie. I just didn't mind it because, at least that was, something new. I did genuinely think... God.
It's just amazing how, towards the end of the movie, Jess and I were like, this just feels like the first one again. A lot of the bigger beats are just very similar to the first movie.
Yeah, I mean, I do think as well though this movie does sort of suffer greatly from the choice of at the end of the first movie, because wouldn't a lot of this been so much smoother if they hadn't sent humans packing? If this movie opens and it's 15 years later and the war has just continued, and the movie opens with Jake and his family arriving at the Water Tribe because they've just been pushed out of the forest by humanity. isn't that smoother and neater and immediately establishes what threat the people are?
Can you imagine a movie if that happens and the older people of the Water Tribe are like, well, you can stay here for a bit, but you can't. Like, we can't get involved in this war. And then the kids still go on the journey. The kids go on and they relate to them more and they teach them the ways. And that's why at the end, because also, let's point that out, at the end of this movie, the water rising element in general is I think done quite well. But especially the notion that the whole movie is about Jake trying to save his family and save his kids and protect his kids, but the kids save their parents in both cases. Like the father and mother, they get saved by the kids, and that is done well, and it is effective. I don't think it's effective enough to get past my feelings about the rest of the movie. But if someone was to sit here and go, "I loved that," and it made me emotional, I'd be like, "Yeah, fair, I get that. Like, I can see that. I can see that working." Well, it worked for me. I could just see it really working for some people as well. But yeah, there's that version, like you say, where it happens anyway. There's countless ways to make this movie more concise, I think.
Yeah, and I think being a bit clearer with like a bit better at like actually exploring the characters so we understand their motivations. Like Jake has the clearest arc of the movie, but I have to do a bit of fansplaining to make that function. At no point in this movie do they really lean into it's the having kids that's changed him. Because there's a point in the middle of the movie when he says like, "Oh, they won't stop and they can't be beat. We need to go hide," right? And even though that's what Jake has already done once this film, I went, that doesn't feel in character for Jake. And I had to go, oh, right, he's different because of the kids now. Like, I had to sort of fill that in myself. Because the kids are the thing that causes him to go into hiding at the beginning of the movie because they nearly get hurt, and it's his fear for them that makes him bolt and has changed him. But like the movie doesn't lay it out enough, so for a minute I'm like, that's out of character, and I went, oh no, I guess that kind of makes sense if I think about it. But like the movie hasn't, because as well, if it was going, well, it's still there. I don't think it like I'm really having to make a bigger leap than normal. When we talk about text and subtext, I think there's always a fair debate you could have about like if you can fill it in. Is that still subtext? Could that not count as what the movie writers were leading you to? But I do think there's a line when you cross subtext and go into fansplaining, which is a term we've coined on this podcast of where, you know, if you want to defend the thing and you know something doesn't make sense, you sometimes can make up a reason in your own head that makes it work, and that's great. If you can do that and it works for you, brilliant. But if there's not enough breadcrumbs of it there in either the text or the subtext of the movie, I think it can be leveled as a criticism at the movie. And I think, you know, considering Jake's supposed to be the main character and he's the one with the most sort of clear arc, even that I've had to use fansplaining to make function. That's not great, just from a basic storytelling perspective. So yeah, I've wrote a few other quick notes. One of them I wrote is from right at the end of the movie when the Sullys, go back together, but Spider hasn't rejoined them yet. And I wrote this note because this is what they say. They say Sullys stick together, and I've added, but Sullys don't ask, "Where's Spider?" Yeah. No one seems worried that Spider has not gotten out of the ship.
Nope. Until that moment when he gets back and it's like, "Are you okay? Son for a son." Madness.
Yeah. Also, all right, I understand Spider being like, you know, screw you to Gav, because like Gav has been a monster the whole movie, right? He's not a good bloke, right? And I think that Spider is established as a morally correct enough character to know that you know, burning down these villages, treating the Na'vi this way, you know, is bad, and therefore no, not dealing with that guy. But I think Neytiri putting a knife to his neck and then slashing his chest after consistently treating him poorly the entire movie would also give him grounds to do the same thing and be like, nah, to the Sully family also. To be honest with you. I think he'd have reason to be like, yeah, no, don't love it. Don't love this situation.
The fansplaining of that is he knows she's grieving.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Let's see. I've got other notes. Oh, I wrote down something else I liked. A lot of people criticize this movie for having a lot of long establishing shots that hurt the pace. I think that's the least of this film's crimes. I'll be honest with you. If you fix the story, I think if you fix the story and you made the plot more concise, you could take 45 minutes out of this movie just from that, and then those shots wouldn't feel like the problem. I think people are misunderstanding the issue when they complain about that, personally. To me, the problem and the reason it feels long is because of the way it's structured, the story is told. I don't think it's just that there are lots of establishing shots. I mean, some of them might be a bit excessive, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I wrote a bunch of notes about how scenes make the same point over and over again as well, so the movie also feels repetitive. Even in the first act of the movie, there are multiple sequences where, so for example, Spider and Gav see footage of Jake and Neytiri killing him, but he already wanted revenge on Jake. We established that earlier in the movie. So we're just swimming in the same pool. We're not really saying anything new. We're just reminding a character that's already been reminded of why he hates Jake, right? And then we've got the scene after they blow up the gunship, the gun train, where Jake tells his son off and tells him he should have stayed behind. And then 10 minutes later, when the other kids are kidnapped, Jake tells that son to stay behind again, and it's the same beat. It's the exact same beat twice. Neytiri's choice to leave Spider when they're escaping in that first act with the kids you could argue, be an interesting choice. But we already knew that's how she feels about him. It's nothing new. We're not establishing anything new about Neytiri. She already said she feels he should be back with the humans, with his own kind. She says that right up top in the weird montage at the beginning of the movie. So that's just reinforcing or repeating a beat we've already had. The movie is full of this. The movie is just full of, here's a thing, and here's that same thing again, because we're going to re-establish it. Weird. Let's see. Anything else? Let's see. I think the second act is mostly functional, plot-wise, though. They have the standoff with the kids, and the Na'vi are mad, like in the first movie, although this time it's over them killing a space whale, not a sacred tree. That's fine. It's repetitive, but it does function. And as Chris said, the sequence of them under the ship as it's sinking and the things are filling has, a reasonable amount of tension to it. And I think it's better than them just running around gunning down bad guys. More interesting than that, for sure. Which it could have easily been.
Yeah, definitely.
I found another thing I like. I love that they really do make an effort to show you Spider watching them operate the ship closely earlier in the movie. So that later in the movie, when he grabs... I only noticed it on this viewing, but early in the movie, you see him watching really closely as they push the control forward to make the ship go forward. And then later on, when he does his escape attempt, he grabs a fire extinguisher and hits that exact piece of the controls to make it stop so the ship doesn't work. Brilliant. That was really well done. It's established subtly enough that it's not too much of a Chekhov's gun. You might miss it, I think, almost, but then it happens and it fits in and it makes perfect sense. That's just good writing and filmmaking. Love that.
Yeah, that was done well.
Oh yeah, my other question. Right, this is the last one, I think. That's of any note, and then we can just wrap up and do Triv. They catch two of the kids again, just at the start of the third act, right? And Jake and all of the water Na'vi are approaching, and they stop, and he gets on the radio, Gav, and he's all like, "I got your kids," and he chooses to give himself up rather than risk his kids' lives. That's the moment, right? Mm-hmm. What's different between that and the moment 20 minutes later in the movie when things reset and once again Gav's got his kids and tells him to give himself up on the radio? That time he goes in all guns a-blazing. If it was too risky the first time and it would get his kids killed, what's changed? Just the loss of the first son?
I think so. That's my assumption, yeah.
Because it kind of felt like to me like they just were like, "Oh, we need an action beat. We can't have Jake agree to give himself up a second time."
Yeah, I think it's the death of the son. I think because and that moment where they're walking away and Gav, you think is because you think it's nearly over because surely it must be, and it's nowhere near over. Where Gav's like, when he's got the kids and they're going away, and Gav goes, at some point, you and me are gonna face off, and Jake's like, well, let's just do it then. And he rushes forward and they start fighting. I did think that moment was cool. I know it's separate to what you were talking about, but it reminded me of it. I thought that worked. Yes, and it's just
I guess it does fit in with my version of what I think the character arc for him is as well, which is the lesson he learns following the death of that son is that he needs to take a stand, not run away. So maybe that is.
Oh, they definitely.
Maybe that is
to be the. He says that in the last line of the movie. The last line of the movie might as well be like, in case you've not been paying attention, guys, my character arc is this.
Yeah. And I guess that's them demonstrating it in his choices rather than his dialogue, which is what I always say they should be doing. I guess it's just not done in a clear enough way that I followed it. So that's kind of a negative on the movie, but also a positive because they do at least it is there. It does track. So yeah, I think I don't know. I look, it's a bad movie. I don't think anyone should watch it. And if it comes back in cinemas, I also don't think you should watch it because it's going to have the same bullshit frame rate issues. I saw someone the other day. In my research, just checking that this was an issue, I saw someone commenting like, "Oh, are those frames from the higher frame rate versions just lost forever? Oh, what a shame that no one will ever be able to experience it this way." And I was just like, I wanted to just comment under it like, you're a fucking idiot. It's a godsend that no one will have to suffer through the frame rate issue again. I would only feel that way if the whole movie had been shot that way. Because then it is a shame, because that's a format some people might enjoy. But the way it was done was just fucking dreadful. Anyway, so yeah, bad movie. Don't see it. Don't watch it. Don't indulge this shit. Don't indulge it any further. Don't go see the third one. Don't be tricked again.
Yeah, well, let's just unpick that quickly, because are you not going to see the third one?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I did it with this one. I saw it with all the 3D bells and whistles. When's the third one coming out? Next year? It's not going to be any different. It's not going to look any different. It's probably going to have the same frame rate issues.
Because we had a theory that the second one would still be a success, and the third one would not be the success that people thought it would be, because the novelty of going back to it. But I don't know, the amount of like positive reviews I've heard for this movie is crazy. It did get people saying it's too long and stuff. But yeah, it's just mad.
Yeah, I mean, and look, financially, it was quite a success.
What's the third highest rating film of all time? Highest earning film of all time?
Yeah, it's at 2.3 billion with a B. And here's my thing, right? And I was interested in this. There is no way to know how much money they spent on this movie. Unfortunately, we will literally never know how much they spent for a couple of reasons. It's complicated. Basically, there was a huge amount of money spent on research and development for the technology before production even started. We're talking hundreds of millions. The premise being that the technology developed during that time would then be used across 3 to 5 movies, depending on what they did. They shot this 1 and 3 back to back, and based on the success of this, they're probably now shooting 4 and 5. All were written together, by the way, so all 5 scripts are ready. They're good to go.
Yes, but apparently those rumoured titles are... I looked up, apparently those rumoured titles for the next lot, Cameron has said, even though The Way of Water was right, that he's not confirmed the titles of the next lot.
Right. Yeah, understood. That makes sense. You might find the right title close to the time. These things take time to percolate, and you can always change the title of a movie right at the last minute. So, as Revenge of the Jedi will attest to. I wouldn't put much. So they might have been the titles at one point or another, but basically, because of the way the money is being spread across multiple productions, but also a research and development thing that happened before production even started, where they pumped a bunch of money into just developing technology to be used across these 3 movies, or these 2 movies that they shot, there's just absolutely no way to calculate how much any of these movies have cost. We might be able to, once all 4 sequels, or two if they don't make One Beyond 2. They will, I think. They will be a way when we can sit at the end and say, okay, they put this much into research and development and this much across the 5 or the 4 movies, and this is how much they made. Be able to do that equation at a certain point. But right now, it is literally impossible to say how much profit this movie made because of the way that it was shot and budgeted. But yeah, 2.3 billion is a lot of money.
Yep, it was undeniably a hit, and again, got a lot of positive reviews.
I think the next one is half of that, and that'd still be a victory. But I don't think it's going to do as well at all.
We shall see.
I think we're going to see a significant drop.
Should we do it?
So yeah. Oh, let's do it, Chris.
Let's triv it up.
I'm going to give you some, very distinctly, some trivia. Because let me tell you, Chris, the trivia for this film decided it wanted to act like the film itself and be deeply long but deeply uninteresting. I have never seen such an unnecessarily long page of trivia that was actually just drivel on IMDb.
Yeah, because I believe you predicted, you were like, it's a modern movie, there's not going to be much trivia that ever is for modern movies.
Mate, there are. Even the bits of trivia there are multiple paragraphs long. Everything in it is deeply long. I could not believe what a great analogy for this movie this was. Shallow trivia, but loads of it. Madness. So anyway, right. So, according to James Cameron, the sequels were sort of... They did a writing room, basically, between 4 writers. Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver, Josh Friedman, and Shane Salerno. Now, Josh Friedman is a writer I really do respect. And he worked on a show called Sarah Connor Chronicles, which I absolutely loved. He worked on the War of the Worlds, the one with... The Tom Cruise one, which I really like, and Ray. He worked on the most recent Foundation series. He's pedigree. I like him a lot. Josh Friedman. The other writers I'm not as familiar with, but basically what they did was they brought them all into a room, plotted out across 7 months every single scene from every one of these films, and then he assigned one of each writer to one of those scripts.
Wow.
What he said was he didn't do that until the absolute last minute, because he knew if he'd assigned them which scripts were going to be theirs ahead of time, they'd all just tune out when the movie that was not theirs was being discussed, and he wanted them all fully invested in making all 4 good. So they each ran off and wrote one movie, and they did not start production in any way, shape, or form until all 4 scripts were ready to go. Is that not a mad way to write a series of movies?
It is, but to be fair though, it is. But also, you go, well, it avoids Force Awakens, Last Jedi. What was the third one called? Rise of the Skywalker. Everything's mapped out. The Kiri thing will have an answer, and that answer is not going to change, and therefore things aren't going to feel juxtaposing from one movie to another. I mean, obviously there's room for stuff to change, but as mad as that is, and I think maybe specifically the thing you were calling mad is the notion of the writer's room dividing up and one person taking on each movie. But still, from a planning perspective, I actually have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think getting ahead of it on that one from a production standpoint is genius. I don't think it's a terrible idea to not tell them which one they're in so they're all invested. And it's worth noting that whole writer's room, Cameron, Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver, Josh Friedman, and Shane Solano all get a story by credit on this. But the script is listed to just James Cameron, Rick Jaffa, and Amanda Silver. So what I'm assuming happened is, of the 4 writers, one of either Rick Jaffa or Amanda Silver was given this movie, and then when it was finished, it was handed to the other for a bit of polishing. So I think all of these movies will have Cameron's name and then a mixture of 2 of each of those 4 other writers. I'm very excited to see whichever one Josh Friedman works on, because I really do rate Josh Friedman as a writer, and I'd be very interested in seeing what he might do with this. So I probably will see the one he wrote, probably on Disney Plus though. I don't think I'm going to the cinema again. No. But yeah. So that's how this movie was written. In 2013, he went down to this meeting when he went into these things. This was all in 2013. He had 1,500 pages of notes exploring the world of Pandora and the various parts of it, which is an amazing thing to sort of see. So while they were all writing the scripts, with all of that information about the world, John Landau, who is a producer who's worked with Cameron since Titanic, immediately foresaw that the technical processes used to capture actors playing Na'vi on the sets that are dry did not exist. That technology did not exist for capturing actors underwater. That technology that captures their performances doesn't do being wet. So they had to start on R&D. And this is what I talked about how much technology had to be developed prior to the movie shooting. So while those scripts were being written over those next couple of years, those 4 scripts, they had to go to Fox with their hands out and say, give us an absolute boatload of money. And again, the amount unclear, but we're talking hundreds of millions. So they had to develop special, wetsuits and rigs that the actors could wear that would capture their performances while underwater, and it wouldn't get wet to the point where it would break. He didn't start filming, as I mentioned, until all 4 scripts were complete. He told Collider that his model was similar to what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They took a chance to launch all 3 of the movies. He had the books mapped out, but could always show the actors what they needed to. But I felt I needed to do the same thing. I had to play this as if the books already existed. So the only way for us to do that was to write all the scripts and let the actors read all the scripts and see where their characters were going and see what it all meant. So there you go. So all the cast already know what's going on for the next 4 scripts.
Blimey.
Yeah. Mad. Cameron considered shooting the entire movie in the higher frame rate. He said, 3D shows you a window into reality. The higher frame rate takes the glass out of that window, but the industry standard is 24 frames per second, and the higher frame rates, 48, 60, or 120, are tricky, technologically speaking. Only certain projectors could do it. He eventually opted out of that route and said that, even though that format is potentially groundbreaking, moviegoers are used to a specific way to watch movies, and altering that would maybe take the audience out of that experience. Instead, only certain scenes would utilize the higher frame rate technology. That takes people out of the experience even more, James. So good work, you absolute pleb.
Again, not a fan of the frame rate.
And I think I actually remember talking about it on MBS the week I saw it, going on a rant about it then. Was a problem from the minute I saw it, remains a problem. And I was so... you know what? I think I had a better visual experience watching it on fucking Disney Plus as a result. Sigourney Weaver told the story of how Kiri was first offered to her by James Cameron. She said, I was having lunch with Jim, and he started talking about this forest girl who had a special gift of connection to living things. She was going to be about 14. And he said, I know how immature you are, so I think you can handle this. Weaver said that, I don't think any of us are that far from our 14-year-old selves. It's such a strong memory, how great it was and how awful it was. I just sort of fell in love with the character. Jim has an amazing ability to write straight into the heart of a character. So Weaver had to obviously perform very differently to her other roles. She talked about her not just being trained to do all of the... Because everyone who worked on this movie had to be trained to breathe underwater for extended periods of time and all that stuff. But she, despite being told maybe we could use doubles enough because of her age, insisted on learning it all. She learned the sign language. She learned the parkour. She actually made an effort to try and keep up with the kids that she was acting alongside, because keep in mind, when she's running across the landscape, she's running across the landscape with actual children actors who are, young and spry. She said, I was determined to be able to run along the trees, racing to the tops of floating mountains. Wait, no, I've read that. I'm sorry, the lines jumped because of how much of a block of text this all is. I was determined to be able to do everything they did. I wanted everyone to say, she's kind of an old lady. She says, I didn't want anyone to say she's kind of an old lady. We all had to be really fit, and parkour was a good way of getting there. So there you go.
Well, I assume I assume even the younger kids, the actors are still older than the ages they're playing.
Good question. I don't actually know. No, I'd have to have a look into that.
I don't
Probably
know.
though. That'd be my guess, but I don't know. When Sigourney Weaver first saw Kiri's design, she objected to it. Felt it was too neat and pretty. She advocated for Kiri to have a messier design and be more of an awkward teenager, pointing out that many girls do not feel as though they are pretty on the inside. They changed her to have like slightly less consistent hair and like a bunch of other stuff to make her a bit more of a sort of honest teenager, which I think is, fair enough. So here's the good one. I like this. This is my favourite piece of trivia. Kate Winslet performed all of her own underwater stunts herself, and she broke Tom Cruise's underwater filming record from Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. She was underwater for 6 minutes. Apologies. Cruise was underwater for 6 minutes, but Kate Winslet beat him with 7 minutes and 15 seconds of being underwater and not breathing while acting. Madness.
That is
just
nuts.
very
I
impressive.
mean, it's impressive, and also like you don't need to risk your safety like that, Kate. It's fine. Don't feel you have to.
Yeah, madness. Absolutely madness. So let's have a look. This is interesting. So the Met Kenya clan, which I think is the water clan, were inspired sort of by the Maori culture on Earth. Maori actors from the cast of the Avatar sequels were working with Cameron to incorporate elements of New Zealand culture into the customs and traditions. Notably, Cliff Curtis and James Cameron worked together to adapt a traditional haka dance into a Na'vi-inspired dance for the clan to perform, incorporating the tail and ear movement. The tattoos of the clan also resemble traditional Maori tattoos in placement and style. So there's an estimate here that these sequels, meaning 2 and 3, will collectively cost $1 billion. If that's true, then this movie covered the cost, and anything made in the next one would be profit anyway.
Which again speaks to the crazy success of this film. Film. That's mad.
Yeah, so it's technically $500 million per movie in theory for this one and the next one.
That is unbelievable.
But that doesn't include marketing, I will say. So yeah, that's production budget. Marketing will be another, well, they usually say double it. I don't know if you would double 1 billion to 1 billion for marketing, but yeah. Edward Norton turned down a role after finding out he'd be playing a human character. He was more interested in playing a Na'vi. James Cameron still wanted to work with Norton, so cast him in Alita Battle Angel as the character Nova. Let's have a look.
Who would Ed Norton have played here? None of the human characters are that big a role, are they?
Yeah, I wondered about that. I don't know. One of the whaling guys, maybe.
Maybe Jermaine Clement's character, maybe.
Yeah, either Jermaine Clement's character or for a bit more fun, the other guy, like the guy that gets his comeuppance. That'd have been a fun character.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, that would have been fun. Yeah.
But anyway, James Cameron explains why there's so many mysteries with Kiri, revealing that it's an important part of the longer story connecting to the sequels. We ask a lot of questions with Kiri that we don't answer, even over the course of the entire film. It's a greater story arc. It's a bigger journey for the audience with her, but it's okay because you care about her because she has a luminous quality. No, you don't care about her, Mr. Cameron. Apologies, but she's as flat as a pancake. There is nothing to that character to latch onto whatsoever. She is a MacGuffin, as far as I'm concerned right now. And
but also,
uninteresting.
Also, tree shit, yeah? It wouldn't surprise me if she doesn't even have a father. If it's just the tree and the world and the god and all that sort of stuff.
Like an Immaculate Conception style sitch. Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but I think it's the wrong question. Who's the father is the wrong question. How did the deceased Avatar have a child is the better question, surely.
Yeah. God damn this movie. This movie is awful. In an interview with Esquire, James Cameron revealed he cut portions of the sequel depicting gun violence because he no longer wants to fetishize the gun. I actually cut about 10 minutes of the movie targeting gunplay action. I wanted to get rid of some of the ugliness to find a balance between the light and the dark. You have to have conflict, of course. Violence and action are the same thing depending on how you look at it. This is the dilemma of every filmmaker, and I'm known as an action filmmaker. I respect that he made that choice. I did like that the culmination of this was like a survival thing where they were, on a sinking ship rather than just, gunplay. So yeah, that's something. But I mean, I can't believe you took fucking 10 minutes out of this movie. Like, Jesus, could you have not taken a little more? Anyway.
Yeah, come on, James, trim a bit more. Although I agree with you, like I said earlier, the water rising thing I enjoyed. Yeah.
It's a good section of the movie. It's one of the better ones. James Cameron was adamant the Tulkuns were not whales. I nearly got through the... this is from Jim Barrett, who was the senior animation supervisor on the film. So he was working with Weta. He said, I nearly got through the whole movie without calling it a whale in front of Jim. I did it once, and I was immediately corrected. Oh, God. So Mark Maron apparently auditioned for the role of Dr. Garvin, which is the Jermaine Clement character. But in the end, he didn't get the role, but he was actually happy because he didn't really want to have to spend that much time away from his cats. I love Mark Maron. He also says that while scripts for up to 5...
I saw Jermaine... I saw his name on the list for the third film, so I think he's coming back.
Yeah, Jermaine's definitely coming back. The question, I guess, because he clearly survived, I think. The question is, are they going to bring back the other whaling guy, but with like a robot arm?
I hope so.
Yeah, why not, right? You fucking might as well. If we're going to bring back characters that have actually died, I mean, that guy could very easily be alive. If we decide he's dead, I'm going to be like, come on.
Give him an avatar. Fuck it.
Yeah. Shit, why not? Who cares? In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, James Cameron revealed that while scripts for up to 5 have been written, he does also have ideas for 6 and 7, if there's enough demand for it. He said, obviously, I'm not going to be able to make Avatar movies indefinitely. I'd be 89 by then. The amount of energy required, I would have to train somebody how to do this because I don't care how smart you are as a director, you don't know how to do this. Look, these movies are very unusual and very hard to produce, and there is no movie shot like these movies are shot. That is 100% true.
What was the quote? It wasn't about directing it; it was about watching it. Didn't he say people would shit themselves with their mouths open or something?
No, he said, someone said to him, they asked him the question of when's the best time for someone to go to the toilet, and he said, whenever the hell you want, you're going to see it again anyway.
That's great.
Which I do kind of respect, like the boldness of that, but like, yeah. So Cameron was 68 at the time of the film's release, making him the oldest person to direct a film that grossed over 1 billion worldwide. The previous record holder was Bill Condon, who was 61 when 2017's Beauty and the Beast was released.
Yeah, fair play. That's a good record.
Oh, and then Spider's mother's identity is revealed in a tie-in comic as a character called Paz Socorro, who was a Scorpion pilot killed during the assault on the Tree of Souls in the first movie.
There you go.
Yeah. And during the Harry Potter movies, of course, Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses. I gotcha!
Because why not? Why not? When we're in such a emotionally similar state.
Yeah. So, cars don't exist because there are no cars in this movie. Most of the stuff in it was made for the movie rather than it. So there are bulldozers in the movie. There are robotic cranes in the movie. There are sort of vehicles in the movie. But it's all just made for movie. None of this is based on real world stuff. Yeah, sorry.
Fair enough. That's that's, again an indication of why these movies are so much work, and regardless of the plot and all the rest of it, commendable because it's a lot of work to design, create, direct this shit. Like
and to be fair, the thing I complimented the most from the first movie was the art direction, and we haven't really talked about that here because it's still amazing. Like the movie still looks great. The bioluminescence, I love the shots in this movie of the Na'vi, the Pandora sunset isn't a traditional sunset. Their sunset is when their sun goes behind another planet, so it's an eclipse that makes it night on Pandora. What a fucking beautiful visual choice. A lot of the shots when they're swimming around in the water look amazing. Again, art direction is still top tier. Like the designs on these things are still incredible, and like while the water world sort of is a lot similar to going underwater in our world, it still naturally feels quite alien because obviously most of us don't live under the sea with SpongeBob and Sandy. So it's still pretty good, even though there's nothing as maybe creative or as outlandish as the floating mountains from the first one, where you go, wow, this is so truly alien. Or there's like weird plants that do weird shit. There's not anything as quite as unusual in this movie. The space whales are kind of pretty much whales. There are sort of sharks and like other things that go in and out of the water. Like nothing under the water that doesn't resemble an Earth thing, but still really well designed and looks great. So yeah, top tier.
Absolutely, yeah.
Top
there we go.
Tier. So yeah, art direction, people get thumbs up. Music's pretty good, and all the acting is pretty good. This must be a very hard movie to act in. And we've, I haven't really shouted out the cast, but they all do a really good job. So yeah, just a few things that we kind of missed. I actually want to particularly just Jake Champion, who plays Spider, like the often just the one human character in a sea of Na'vi. Like he's acting his ass off in this movie, and he's doing a pretty good job. So yeah,
that's fair. So the big question, Dan, where are we heading next, baby?
So I have never been so torn because there's a thing I was going to choose before this choice came up. Oh, actually, no, we haven't answered the major question. What did Jess think? She's the one who she forced this upon us. What did she think?
She did enjoy it. She thought it was all right. But she had all the same complaints that we had about it. And felt it was really long, and I think it was a disappointment to her because she enjoyed the first one more than me, whereas with this one she felt very similar to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I'm in a weird position, Chris, because there's a thing I was going to choose, and then this kind of threw me through a bit of a loop because I was like, do I kind of still get away with choosing this? So there are some other options. I think I'm going to commit to it. I think even though it is similar to this, I do think we owe listeners something. We talked a lot in our Indiana Jones movies about Dial of Destiny. It was upcoming at the time. We released them around the release of Dial of Destiny, but we recorded them 10 weeks earlier. And there was a lot of teasers of, we're looking forward to it. Well, I think we In Mangold We Trust was the name of it, and Nothing But Static episode from around that time. And a lot of people have asked.
Well, there was also that incredible trailer, which made the movie look amazing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are curious how we felt. So I am choosing Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which both goes with this, but also is kind of the same thing of this. It's like a more recent movie. And the most recent movie we've ever covered, with the exception of what's it called?
Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, that was it. Fantastic Beasts and the horse that picks the president.
Literally, Way of Water took that record last week, and now this movie is taking the record 1 week later. So it's the shortest record holder in existence, probably for for Rewind reviews.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I know there's other choices. There's a Fast and Furious sequel we need to get to. You know, there's Mr. Bean's Holiday, which is the one Chris referenced last week. There's Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, which I asked Nadia, by the way, because last week you gave Jess the list and asked her to choose. I said to Nadia, if I'd given you the same list, what movie would you have chosen? And she chose Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. So that was on there. That's an option. You know, sequel season, man. The rules are out the window. We can choose anything. Legacy sequels are as game as anything else. But while this did feel too similar as a choice, I really think we kind of owe the audience. We talked so much about Dial of Destiny without ever actually reviewing it. So I am committing now. We're doing Dial of Destiny next week.
There you go. Boom.
Yeah. So if you want to hear that right now, you can get us over on Patreon. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can listen to episodes a week early.
Yeah, get there. Here are thoughts on that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, it's another long one, that movie. Not as long.
No, nowhere near as
Nothing's
long.
as long.
And I think probably like maybe a little more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, not necessarily enjoyable though, but yeah, probably a little more enjoyable, sure.
Yeah, so I'm not going to put the horse before the cart. That's an interesting reaction. But yeah, because I think this was an absolute shit show. So for me, like, this will be a lot more than a little more enjoyable. I would much rather watch Dial of Destiny than Avatar: Way of Water. Let me tell you, by quite some way. But yeah, I think you've got listeners. Check it out. It's out there if you want to hit. It's as little as $1 a month on the Patreon. Gives you access to our Discord as well as access to Analyzing Avatar a week early and our other bonus podcast, Nothing But Lyrics. But I think otherwise, if you got any thoughts, maybe you loved Way of Water, get in the comments. YouTube.com/nothingButStatic. You can like the video, give your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. You can also email us, mail@nothingButStatic.co.uk. But otherwise, I think that's all the things. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening, especially because this ended up being a surprisingly long one. What was it, 2 hours and 10 minutes-ish? That's not bad. That's more than I thought we'd get out of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, same, because I was expecting us to just be like, it's not very good, here's why.
Yeah, but I guess the here's why is somewhat interesting. It's not like a complete one of those movies where it's a complete disaster and we can sit here and like hilariously shit on it. It's like bad in really like simple, obvious ways, like the characters don't work, the story doesn't function, all these really basic things. I, like you at the time, was really shocked at the reviews being so positive. So yeah, what a mess. So I'm gonna hand it over to Chris. Oh, go on, sorry.
Well, again, check out Mark Commode's review of this movie.
Yeah, I've not seen it. I've not seen it since. I might watch it now after this.
Yeah, give it a watch. It's brilliant. Yeah. So there we go. We come back next week for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, my name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been Rewound.